The dirt beneath Helena Warner's feet was bone dry and cracked like the broken promises her uncle had made over the years since her parents died. And now, she stood in the scorching Arizona sun of 1881 outside a saloon in Globe, waiting to meet the stranger who had supposedly paid $300 for her like. She was nothing more than a horse or a piece of furniture. Her hands trembled as she clutched the worn fabric of her only decent dress, a faded blue cotton thing that had seen better days, much like herself. She was 19 years old, and in all those years, she had never imagined her life would come to this moment of absolute humiliation and terror. Her Uncle Raymond had gambling debts that stretched from Globe to Tucson, and when the creditors came calling with threats that went beyond words, he had done the unthinkable. He had written up a bill of sale with her name on it, advertising her to any man with enough money to clear his debts. The shame of it burned hotter than the Arizona sun beating down on her neck. Helena had tried to run 2 days ago, but Raymond had caught her before she made it past the copper mines on the edge of town. He locked her in the cellar overnight and told her in the morning that a cowboy had already paid the price, and she had better cooperate or things would get worse for everyone involved. The saloon doors swung open, and a tall man stepped out into the dusty street. He wore typical cowboy attire, dark pants with worn leather chaps, a chambray shirt that had faded from many washings, and a brown hat that shaded his face from the brutal sun. His boots were scuffed and practical, not the fancy kind some of the ranch owners wore when they came into town. Helena's stomach twisted with dread as he approached, and she forced herself to look up at his face. What she saw surprised her. He could not have been much older than 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds over the mountains. His face was tanned from long days outdoors, with a strong jaw and features that might have been handsome under different circumstances. But what caught her attention most was the expression in those gray eyes. It was not the look of a man who had just purchased property. It was something else entirely, something almost sad. "Miss Warner," he said, removing his hat politely. His voice was deep and steady, with a hint of an accent she could not quite place. "My name is Isaac Quinn. I expect your uncle told you about our transaction." Helena could not speak. Her throat had closed up entirely, and she felt tears threatening to spill over. She would not cry. She refused to give her uncle or this stranger the satisfaction of seeing her break down completely. Isaac looked at her face for a long moment, then glanced toward the saloon where her uncle was undoubtedly drinking away the money he had just received. Something hardened in Isaac's expression, and he reached into his vest pocket. Helena flinched instinctively, but he only pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This here is the bill of sale your uncle signed," Isaac said quietly, holding it up so she could see her own name written in her uncle's careless scrawl. "He signed away another human being like you were livestock. Like you were property to be bought and sold." "I know what I am now," Helena managed to whisper, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. "You paid for me. I understand the situation." "No," Isaac said firmly. "You do not understand at all." Before Helena could respond, he pulled a match from his pocket, struck it against his boot heel, and held the flame to the corner of the bill of sale. The paper caught quickly in the dry air, and within seconds, it was engulfed in flames. Isaac held it until the fire nearly reached his fingers, then dropped the burning paper to the ground where it curled into black ash. "You are not property," he said, grinding the ashes into the dirt with his boot heel. "You are not owned by anyone, not by your uncle and certainly not by me. That bill of sale never existed as far as I am concerned." Helena stared at the dark smudge in the dirt where the paper had been, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She looked up at Isaac with wide eyes, afraid to hope, afraid to believe what she was seeing. "I do not understand," she said. "You paid $300. Why would you just burn it?" Isaac put his hat back on and met her gaze directly. "Because what your uncle did was wrong. Slavery ended more than 15 years ago. And even if the law has some backwards way of looking at things when it comes to debts and family obligations, there is no law in heaven or on earth that makes it right for a man to sell his own niece to settle his gambling debts." "But the money," Helena protested. $300 is a fortune. You cannot just lose that much money for nothing." "It is not for nothing," Isaac said. "And honestly, I am not losing much. I own a small ranch about 10 miles north of here. I run cattle, breed horses, do some work for the bigger outfits when they need extra hands. I do well enough. $300 hurts. I will not lie about that, but I will make it back eventually. Your freedom is worth more than money." Helena felt the tears come then, hot and overwhelming, streaming down her face faster than she could wipe them away. She had been so frightened, so certain that her life was over, that she would become some stranger's property in truth. And here was this man, this cowboy she had never met before, telling her she was free. "I do not have anywhere to go," she admitted through her tears. "My parents died 6 years ago from fever. Raymond was my only family. He gave me a place to stay, even if it was just a small room in his house and chores from dawn to dusk. Without that, I have nothing. No money, no home, no prospects." Isaac was quiet for a moment, and Helena could see him thinking, weighing options in his mind. Finally, he spoke carefully. "I have a proposition for you if you are willing to hear it, and I want to be clear that this is an offer, not an order or a demand. You can say no, and I will still help you figure something out." "What kind of proposition?" Helena asked warily. She had learned the hard way that men's propositions were rarely as innocent as they sounded. "I need help at my ranch," Isaac said. "I have about 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses, chickens, a few pigs. The house needs a woman's touch, to put it mildly. I can cook enough to keep myself alive, but I would not call it good eating. The place needs cleaning, organizing, all the things I am terrible at managing. I can pay you a wage, $20 a month plus room and board. You would have your own room, your privacy, and my word that I would not try anything improper. After a few months, if you wanted to move on, you would have enough money saved to start over somewhere else. Or if you liked the work, you could stay on as long as you wanted." Helena studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden motives. She had been fooled before by men who said one thing and meant another. But Isaac's gray eyes were steady and honest, and something in his manner made her want to trust him. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "Why would you pay $300 to free me, then offer me a job and wages on top of that? What do you get out of this arrangement?" Isaac smiled slightly, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "I get help running my ranch from someone who I expect will work hard because she wants to, not because she is forced to. I get to sleep at night knowing I did the right thing, and maybe, if I am lucky, I get a friend out of this whole mess. I live alone out there, Miss Warner. It gets pretty lonely sometimes." Helena made her decision. She had nothing to lose, and if Isaac Quinn turned out to be lying about his intentions, well, she could not be worse off than she already was. "I accept your offer, Mr. Quinn, and thank you. I do not think I can ever properly thank you for what you have done today. You can thank me by calling me Isaac, and by letting me get you out of this town before your uncle realizes what happened to that bill of sale," Isaac replied. "I have my horse tied up at the stable. Do you have anything you need to collect from your uncle's house?" Helena shook her head. "Nothing I want to keep. Everything I own that matters is in this small bag." She held up a worn cloth satchel she had been clutching in her other hand. It contained a change of clothes, her mother's wedding ring, and a small Bible that had belonged to her father. "Then let us go," Isaac said. "We can make it back to the ranch before dark if we leave now." They walked together to the stable, and Helena felt a strange sensation building in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. She had been without hope for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like. Isaac's horse was a sturdy bay gelding with kind eyes and a calm disposition. Isaac paid the stable boy, then mounted up and reached down to help Helena up behind him. "Hold on tight," he said. "I promise I will not let you fall." Helena wrapped her arms around Isaac's waist, feeling awkward and self-conscious about the physical contact. But as the horse began to move, carrying them out of Globe and toward the mountains in the distance, she found herself relaxing slightly. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait was soothing, and Isaac sat solid and sure in the saddle. They rode in silence for a while, leaving the town behind. The landscape opened up into rolling hills covered with scrub brush, saguaro cacti standing like sentinels in the distance. The Pinal Mountains rose up blue and hazy on the horizon. Helena had lived in Globe for 6 years, but she had rarely ventured beyond the town limits. Raymond had kept her too busy with chores and too controlled to explore. After about an hour, Isaac broke the silence. "Can I ask you something, Helena? If I am being too forward, just tell me to mind my own business." "You just burned a bill of sale and offered me a job," Helena replied. "I think you have earned the right to ask questions. What happened to your parents? You said they died 6 years ago." Helena felt the familiar ache in her chest that always came when she thought about her mother and father. "Fever," she said simply. "We were living in Texas at the time, near San Antonio. There was an outbreak that swept through the area. My father got sick first and my mother caught it while nursing him. They died within days of each other. I was 13 years old. Raymond was my father's brother. He came to collect me and brought me back here to Arizona Territory. At first, he seemed kind enough, but after a few months, his true nature showed through. He drank too much, gambled constantly, and expected me to keep his house and do all the work while he contributed nothing. When his debts got bad enough, he started looking at me like I was a solution to his problems instead of his responsibility. "I am sorry," Isaac said, and the sincerity in his voice made Helena believe he truly meant it. "No one should have to go through what you have gone through." "What about you?" Helena asked. "Do you have family?" "Not anymore," Isaac said quietly. "My parents had a small farm in Missouri. They died when I was 17 during the war's aftermath, not from the fighting directly but from the hardship that came after. I had a younger sister, Rose. She died the same year from pneumonia. After that, I had nothing keeping me in Missouri. I worked my way west, taking jobs where I could find them. About 3 years ago, I saved up enough to buy some land here in Arizona and start building something of my own. It is not much yet, but it is mine, and I am proud of it." "I am sorry about your family," Helena said softly. She understood loss, understood the hollow place it left inside you. "We are a pair, are not we?" Isaac said with a sad smile she could hear in his voice. "Both alone in the world. But maybe that is about to change." They rode on through the afternoon, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The temperature dropped slightly as they gained elevation, moving into higher country. Isaac pointed out landmarks along the way, a distinctive rock formation that looked like a sleeping giant, a creek that ran year-round even in drought years, the boundary where his land began. "I have 640 acres," he explained. "A full section. It is not the biggest spread in Arizona, but the land is good. There is water, grazing for the cattle, and enough flat land near the house for crops if I ever get around to planting more than a small vegetable garden. As they crested a hill, Helena saw the ranch spread out below them in a small valley. The house was modest, a single-story wooden structure with a covered porch running along the front. There was a barn that looked sturdy and well-maintained, a corral with several horses visible inside, and various outbuildings. Everything looked neat and organized, if a bit rough around the edges. "It is not fancy," Isaac said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it is solid. I built most of it myself over the past 3 years. It is beautiful," Helena said honestly. After living in her uncle's cramped, dirty house in town, Isaac's ranch looked like paradise. "You built all this yourself?" "The house was here when I bought the land, but it was falling apart. I rebuilt most of it. The barn I put up with help from some of the neighboring ranchers. Out here, people help each other with the big projects. I have been out to help raise barns and dig wells on a dozen different properties. It is how we survive in this territory." Isaac guided the horse down the hill toward the house. As they approached, a dog came bounding out from the barn, barking enthusiastically. It was a large mixed breed with a brown and white coat and a feathery tail that wagged with pure joy at seeing Isaac return. "That is Scout," Isaac said with obvious affection. "He is a terrible guard dog because he loves everyone, but he is good company." Isaac dismounted, then helped Helena down. Her legs were shaky from the long ride and she stumbled slightly. Isaac steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then quickly released her once she had her balance. "Let me show you the house," he said, leading the way up the porch steps. Scout bounded along beside them, sniffing curiously at Helena. The inside of the house was sparse but clean. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space all in one. There was a stone fireplace on one wall, a cast iron stove for cooking, a rough wooden table with 4 chairs, and a few pieces of simple furniture. Everything was tidy, which surprised Helena given that Isaac was living alone. "I try to keep things organized," Isaac said, noticing her expression. "My mother raised me right, even if my cooking skills did not quite take hold. There are 2 bedrooms through those doors." He pointed to 2 doorways on opposite sides of the main room. "You can have the one on the right. It is a bit smaller, but it has a good window that catches the morning light. I am in the one on the left." Helena walked over to the right-hand door and pushed it open. The room was indeed small, but it was clean and cozy. There was a narrow bed with a simple wooden frame, a chest of drawers, a small table with a washing basin, and a window with faded curtains. It was more privacy and space than she had been given in her uncle's house. "It is perfect," she said, turning back to Isaac. "Truly." Isaac smiled, looking relieved. "I am glad you think so. Why do not you get settled in? Take some time to rest from the ride. I need to take care of my horse and do the evening feeding. When I come back in, I will make us some supper. Like I said, I am not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and bacon and coffee that will not kill you." "I can cook," Helena offered. "If you want, I can start earning my wages tonight." "You have had one hell of a day," Isaac said firmly. "Pardon my language. But you have been through something traumatic, and you just rode 10 miles on horseback. Rest tonight. We can worry about work tomorrow." Helena wanted to argue, to prove that she would pull her weight, but exhaustion was suddenly overwhelming. She nodded and watched as Isaac headed back outside. She could hear him talking softly to his horse and dog, his voice carrying through the open windows. She sat down on the bed, testing its firmness. It was comfortable, more so than the thin mattress she had been sleeping on at Raymond's house. She lay back and stared up at the wooden ceiling, her mind racing through everything that had happened that day. This morning, she had been her uncle's prisoner, sold to a stranger. Now she was free, employed and living on a ranch in the mountains with a man who had asked nothing from her except honest work. It seemed impossible, like something from a dream. Helena was afraid to believe it was real, afraid that she would wake up and find herself back in that cellar, waiting to be handed over like property. But the bed beneath her was solid. The room around her was quiet and peaceful, and through the window she could see the sky turning pink and gold with the sunset. She must have dozed off despite her racing thoughts, because the next thing she knew, she was waking to the smell of coffee and something cooking. The light outside had faded to deep twilight. Helena got up, smoothed her dress, and splashed water from the basin on her face. She felt grimy from the road and desperately wanted a proper bath, but that could wait. When she emerged from the bedroom, Isaac was at the stove, poking at a pan with a wooden spoon. He had taken off his hat and chaps, and in the lamplight he looked younger and less intimidating than he had in town. "Sorry if I woke you," he said. "I tried to be quiet." "You did not wake me. The smell of coffee did," Helena replied. "It smells wonderful." "Well, coffee is one thing I can make decently," Isaac said with a slight grin. "The beans and bacon are edible, and I have some bread that I bought from a neighbor lady yesterday. It is not a feast, but it will fill you up." They sat down at the table together, and Isaac served the food onto 2 tin plates. He was right that he was not a talented cook, but the food was hot and plentiful, and Helena realized she had not eaten since early that morning. She ate hungrily while Isaac told her more about the ranch, the work that needed doing, and the routine he followed. "Mornings start early," he explained. "I am usually up by dawn to feed the animals and check on the cattle. Depending on the day, there might be fences to mend, horses to train, or any number of other tasks. The garden needs weeding and watering. The chickens need tending. There is always something that needs doing on a ranch." "I am used to hard work," Helena assured him. "My uncle kept me busy from morning until night. I can handle whatever you need me to do." "I do not doubt it," Isaac said. "But I want you to understand that this is different from what you experienced with your uncle. This is a job, a fair exchange of work for wages. If you are ever too tired or need a break, you just tell me. I am not going to work you to death, and I am certainly not going to treat you the way Raymond did." Helena nodded, taking a sip of the strong coffee. "Why did you do it, Isaac? Really? You could have just walked away from the whole situation. No one would have blamed you for not getting involved." Isaac was quiet for a moment, staring down at his plate. When he spoke, his voice was soft but intense. "About a year ago, I was in Tucson on business. I saw something that has stayed with me ever since. There was a young woman, probably about your age, being auctioned off by her stepfather to pay his debts. It was not legally slavery, of course. It was dressed up as an indentured servitude contract, but everyone knew what it really was. I watched her standing there on that platform with tears running down her face, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to stop it, but I did not have enough money with me to make a bid, and by the time I convinced myself to go to the bank and withdraw what I had saved, she was already gone. Some rancher from outside town had bought her contract. I have thought about that girl almost every day since, wondering what happened to her, wondering if she was all right." He looked up at Helena, and she could see the emotion in his gray eyes. "When I heard about what your uncle was doing, I knew I could not let it happen again. I could not stand by and watch another woman be treated like property. So I went to Raymond and I paid his price. But I always intended to burn that bill of sale. I was never going to keep it." Helena felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the coffee or the food. She had known kindness before her parents died, but in the 6 years since, she had experienced mostly cruelty and indifference. Isaac's compassion was almost overwhelming in its sincerity. That girl in Tucson would be grateful if she knew someone cared enough to remember her, Helena said softly. And I am grateful that you did not just remember this time. You acted. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, and afterward, Helena insisted on washing the dishes while Isaac went out to do a final check on the animals before bed. When he came back in, he found her standing at the basin, drying the last tin cup. "You did not have to do that tonight," he said. "I wanted to," Helena replied. "It felt good to do something normal, something domestic. That was my choice." Isaac nodded, understanding. "Well, I appreciate it. I am going to turn in now. It has been a long day. If you need anything during the night, do not hesitate to wake me. And Helena, the door to your room has a lock on the inside. Use it if it makes you feel safer." "Thank you," Helena said, and meant it with her whole heart. They said their goodnights, and Helena retreated to her small room. She did lock the door, not because she truly feared Isaac would try anything, but because the sense of security it provided was something she desperately needed. She changed out of her dress into her nightgown, a thin cotton garment that was more patches than original fabric. She should make herself a new one soon, she thought. If she was earning wages, she could afford fabric and thread. She lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night. An owl hooted somewhere outside. The wind rustled through the trees. Scout barked once, then settled. And underneath it all, she could hear the faint sound of Isaac moving around in his own room, preparing for bed. Helena stared up at the dark ceiling and thought about the extraordinary turn her life had taken. This morning, she had been sold. Tonight, she was free. This morning, she had no future. Tonight, she had possibilities spreading out before her like the vast Arizona sky. She thought about Isaac, about the sadness in his voice when he talked about his family, about the determination in his eyes when he burned that bill of sale. He was a good man, the kind of man her father had been. Honorable, hardworking, compassionate. It had been so long since Helena had known a man like that, she had almost forgotten they existed. Sleep came slowly, but when it finally took her, Helena's dreams were peaceful for the first time in longer than she could remember. The next morning, Helena woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of a rooster crowing. She dressed quickly in her other dress, a simple gray cotton that was practical if not pretty. When she emerged from her room, Isaac was already up, his bed visible through his open door, neatly made with military precision. She found him outside, tossing feed to a flock of chickens that clucked and pecked around his feet. Scout was lying in a patch of sunlight, tail thumping lazily. "Morning," Isaac called when he saw her. "There is coffee on the stove if you want some. I did not make breakfast yet, figured I would wait to see when you woke up." "I can make breakfast," Helena offered, "if you show me where everything is." Isaac's face lit up. "You do not have to ask me twice. I have been eating my own cooking for 3 years. Having someone else make a meal sounds like heaven." He showed her around the kitchen, pointing out where he kept the supplies. There was a good stock of basics: flour, cornmeal, salt, sugar, coffee, dried beans, and bacon. He had eggs from the chickens, milk from a cow he kept in the barn, and some vegetables from his struggling garden. Helena assessed what she had to work with and got to work. Within an hour, she had produced a proper breakfast of scrambled eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter and jam, and fresh coffee. Isaac sat down at the table with an expression of pure bliss. "This is incredible," he said after his first bite of biscuit. "I have been living off half-burnt bacon and overcooked eggs for 3 years. This is the best breakfast I have had since I left Missouri." Helena felt a flush of pride at his praise. "Wait until you taste my stew, and I make a good pie if you have any fruit put up." "I have canned peaches," Isaac said eagerly. a whole shelf of them in the root cellar. They ate together, and Helena found herself relaxing more. Isaac was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that surprised her. He told her stories about the ranch, about the time a cow got stuck in the creek, and he had to wade in up to his chest to free her, about the horse he was training that had a habit of stealing his hat right off his head. After breakfast, Isaac took Helena on a tour of the ranch, showing her everything in daylight. The barn was well organized, with stalls for the horses, space for hay storage, and a small area where he kept tools and tack. The cow he milked was a placid brown and white creature named Bessie. The pigs lived in a sturdy pen behind the barn, and the garden, while weedy, showed promise. "I am terrible at gardens," Isaac admitted. "I can grow things, but I can never keep up with the weeding and the bugs and all the details. If you want to take that over, I would be eternally grateful." "I would love to," Helena said. Her mother had been an excellent gardener, and Helena had learned from her. Working with growing things would be a pleasure, not a chore. Over the following days and weeks, Helena settled into life on the ranch. She woke early each morning and made breakfast for both of them. While Isaac went out to tend the cattle and horses, Helena would clean the house, care for the chickens and pigs, work in the garden, and prepare meals. The work was hard, but it was satisfying in a way her chores at her uncle's house had never been. Here, she could see the results of her labor. The house became cleaner and more organized. The garden began to thrive under her care. The meals improved dramatically, according to Isaac, who praised every dish she set in front of him. Isaac was unfailingly respectful and kind. He never entered her room without permission, never made inappropriate comments or gestures, and always treated her like an equal partner in running the ranch rather than a servant. He paid her wages at the end of each month, counting out the $20 in coins and bills and placing them in her hand with a simple, "You have earned every penny." Helena saved most of her money in a small tin box she kept under her bed. She spent some on fabric and thread to make herself 2 new dresses and a proper nightgown. She bought a few books from the general store in Globe on the rare occasions when Isaac made a trip to town and offered to bring her along. She was building something, a small nest egg that represented security and independence. But something else was building too, something Helena had not expected and did not quite know what to do with. She found herself thinking about Isaac at odd moments throughout the day. She noticed things about him: the way he hummed tunelessly while he worked, the gentle way he handled the animals, the sight of him coming in from the fields with his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hat pushed back on his head. She began to look forward to meals, not just because she took pride in her cooking, but because it meant sitting across the table from Isaac, talking about their respective days, sharing stories and jokes and comfortable silences. She found excuses to be outside when he was working nearby, hanging laundry so she could watch him work with the horses, weeding the garden when he was mending the fence. Helena tried to tell herself it was just gratitude. Isaac had saved her from a terrible fate. Of course, she felt warmth toward him. But she knew, deep in her heart, that it was becoming something more than gratitude. Isaac seemed to be feeling something similar, though he was just as hesitant to acknowledge it. Helena caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. His eyes would follow her as she moved around the kitchen or hung laundry on the line. When they accidentally touched, reaching for the same thing or passing each other in the narrow spaces of the house, he would pull back quickly, but not before Helena felt a spark of something electric in that brief contact. 3 months after Helena arrived at the ranch, Isaac came in from working in the far pasture earlier than usual. Helena was in the garden, pulling weeds and checking on the tomatoes that were just beginning to ripen. She heard him call her name and looked up to see him standing at the garden fence. "Can we talk?" he asked, and something in his voice made Helena's heart skip. "Of course," she said, brushing dirt off her hands onto her apron. She walked over to where he stood. Isaac looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I have been thinking about something," he began, "and I need to say it before I lose my courage." Helena waited, her heart pounding now. "You have been here for 3 months," Isaac continued. "In that time, this place has become more of a home than it ever was before. The house feels alive now, not just a place where I sleep between work. I look forward to coming in at the end of the day because I know you will be there. I find myself making excuses to come back to the house during the day just to see you, to hear your voice." He paused, taking a deep breath. "What I am trying to say, and doing a poor job of it, is that I have developed feelings for you, Helena. Strong feelings. I think about you constantly. I worry that I am taking advantage of the situation, that you might feel obligated because I helped you and because I employ you. That is the last thing I want, but I could not go on without being honest about how I feel." Helena felt tears spring to her eyes, but these were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of relief and joy. "Isaac," she said softly, "you are not taking advantage of anything. I have feelings for you too. I have for weeks now, but I was afraid to say anything. I thought maybe you were just being kind, that you could not possibly feel the same way about me." Isaac's face transformed with a smile of pure happiness. "Really? You truly feel the same way?" "I do," Helena said, smiling through her tears. "I think I started falling for you the day you burned that bill of sale. You gave me back my freedom, my dignity, my future. But more than that, you have shown me every day since then what a good man you are. You have been patient and kind and respectful. You have made me feel safe and valued. How could I not fall in love with you? You love me," Isaac asked, his voice full of wonder. "I do," Helena admitted. "I love you, Isaac Quinn." Isaac stepped forward, and Helena moved toward him at the same moment. They met at the garden fence, and Isaac reached over it to cup her face in his work-roughened hands. "I love you too, Helena Warner. I think I have loved you since the first moment I saw you standing outside that saloon, trying so hard to be brave when you were terrified. You are the strongest, most incredible woman I have ever met." "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his face close to hers now. "Yes," Helena breathed. Isaac leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, gentle and sweet. It was Helena's first real kiss, and it was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I want to court you properly," Isaac said. "I want to do this right. I know we are living in the same house, which is not exactly conventional, but I want you to know that my intentions are honorable. I want to marry you, Helena, if you would have me, but I do not want to rush you. We can take all the time you need." "I do not need time to know that I want to marry you," Helena said. "I would marry you tomorrow if that is what you wanted." Isaac laughed, a joyful sound that made Helena's heart soar. "Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I want to do it properly, with a real wedding and a proper proposal. I do not have much money, but I am going to buy you a ring. I am going to ask you the right way." "You already burned a bill of sale for me," Helena said. "That is more romantic than any proposal could ever be." "I am going to try to top it anyway," Isaac promised. From that day forward, everything changed and yet remained exactly the same. They continued their work on the ranch, but now they did it as a courting couple. Isaac would steal kisses when they passed each other during the day. They would sit together on the porch in the evenings, talking until the stars came out, with Helena's hand tucked into Isaac's. They talked about their future, about expanding the ranch, about children they might have someday, about growing old together. 2 months later, On a beautiful October evening when the air had finally cooled from the brutal summer heat, Isaac asked Helena to walk with him up to the hill overlooking the ranch. She went willingly, curious about why he seemed so nervous. At the top of the hill, with the ranch spread out below them and the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Isaac got down on one knee. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Helena Warner, you came into my life when I did not even know I was lonely. You turned my house into a home and made me believe in love when I thought I would spend my life alone. Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Helena said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Helena felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Globe. Isaac's neighboring ranchers came to witness the event, along with a few people from town who knew Isaac and respected him. Helena wore a new dress she had made specifically for the occasion, a beautiful cream-colored cotton with lace trim that she had splurged on with her saved wages. The preacher who married them was an older man with kind eyes who smiled throughout the ceremony. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Helena with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance wiped away tears. They held a simple reception at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food that Helena and several neighbor women had prepared. There was music and dancing, and Helena had never been so happy in her entire life. She danced with Isaac until her feet hurt, and even then, she did not want to stop. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Isaac and Helena stood together on their porch, waving goodbye. When the last wagon disappeared down the road, Isaac turned to his wife. "Hello, Mrs. Quinn," he said softly. "Hello, Mr. Quinn," Helena replied, smiling up at him. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Helena answered honestly. 6 months ago, I was being sold by my uncle. Tonight, I am married to the man I love, standing on our porch, looking at our ranch. It feels like a miracle." "You are the miracle," Isaac said. "You took this lonely ranch and this lonely rancher and made everything better just by being here." That night, they became husband and wife in truth, and Helena discovered yet another way that Isaac was gentle and caring. He was patient with her inexperience, taking his time to make sure she felt comfortable and cherished. Afterward, as they lay together in Isaac's bed, which was now their bed, Helena felt a completeness she had never experienced before. The months that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. Helena continued to manage the house and garden while Isaac worked with the cattle and horses. But now they were working toward a shared future, building something together. They talked about their dreams, about buying more land, about raising a family. In the spring of 1882, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after supper, and he reacted with such joy that he picked her up and spun her around, before remembering that she was carrying their child and setting her down gently with profuse apologies. "I am not that fragile," Helena said, laughing. "But yes, we are going to have a baby. In late September or early October, the doctor thinks." Isaac placed his hand on her still flat belly with wonder. "Our child," he said. "A family of our own. Helena, you have given me everything I did not even know I wanted." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Helena did have some morning sickness in the early months that left her pale and exhausted. Isaac insisted on taking over more of the housework during those times, trying his best to cook and clean even though he was terrible at both. Helena found his efforts endearing. even when she had to choke down his overcooked eggs. As her belly grew, Isaac became increasingly protective. He would not let her do any heavy lifting, worried constantly about her working too hard, and built a rocking chair specifically for her to rest in during the afternoons. Helena tolerated his hovering because she knew it came from love, though she did sometimes have to remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable of managing her normal chores. In early October, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, with Helena attended by a midwife from Globe and Isaac pacing the floor of the main room, forbidden from the bedroom but refusing to leave the house. When the midwife finally emerged carrying a squalling, red-faced infant wrapped in a blanket, Isaac nearly knocked her over in his rush to get to his wife. Helena was exhausted but glowing with happiness as she held their son. "We have a baby boy," she said softly. "He is perfect, Isaac." Absolutely perfect. Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his son with awe. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. "He is beautiful," Isaac said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother. What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Looking at her son's face, Helena suddenly knew. "What about James? It was my father's name, James Quinn." "James Quinn," Isaac repeated, smiling. "It is perfect. Welcome to the world, James." The first year of James's life was exhausting but joyful. Helena adjusted to motherhood while still trying to maintain the household. Isaac was a devoted father, getting up in the night to walk with James when he was fussy, playing with him on the floor when he should have been working, proudly carrying him around the ranch to show him the animals and the land that would one day be his. The ranch continued to prosper. Isaac bought more cattle and expanded his herd. He gained a reputation as an honest dealer and a hard worker, and other ranchers sought him out for his expertise with horses. Helena's garden flourished, producing more than enough vegetables for their family and extra to trade with neighbors. When James was 2 years old, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy seemed easier, though chasing after an active toddler while carrying another baby proved challenging. Isaac continued his devoted hovering, and Helena continued to love him for it. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1885, an easy birth compared to James. She was smaller than James had been, with a cap of light brown hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same gray as her father's. "She looks like you," Helena told Isaac as he held his daughter for the first time. "She looks like an angel," Isaac said, completely smitten. "Hello, little one. I am your papa, and I am going to spoil you absolutely rotten." They named her Sarah after Isaac's mother. James was initially skeptical of the tiny creature that had invaded his home and stolen his parents' attention. But within days, he had become fiercely protective of his little sister. Helena often found him sitting next to Sarah's cradle, patting her awkwardly and telling her stories in his toddler babble. The years passed in a blur of activity and growth. James grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning about cattle and horses and the land. Sarah was quieter and more thoughtful, but she had her father's determination and her mother's compassion. Helena often found her in the garden, carefully watering plants and talking to them as if they could understand her. Helena and Isaac's love deepened with each passing year. They still made time for each other, despite the demands of raising children and running a ranch. They would sit on the porch after the children were asleep, holding hands and watching the stars, talking about their day or simply enjoying the comfortable silence that came from two people who knew each other completely. When James was 5 and Sarah was 3, Helena became pregnant a third time. This baby was unplanned but no less welcomed. Our family is growing, Isaac said, placing his hand on Helena's belly. We are going to need to add on to the house soon. I have been thinking the same thing, Helena agreed. Maybe another bedroom or two, and a larger kitchen would not hurt. Isaac began work on the addition that spring, with help from neighboring ranchers. By the time Helena was in her third trimester, they had a house with 4 bedrooms, a larger kitchen, and even a proper parlor for receiving guests. Their third child, another boy they named Daniel, was born in early 1888. He was a robust baby with a powerful set of lungs and an appetite that amazed Helena. "This one is going to be bigger than James," she predicted, and she was right. Daniel grew quickly, soon outpacing where James had been at the same age. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Isaac bought more land when the opportunity arose, eventually expanding their holdings to nearly 1,000 acres. They built a new barn to accommodate more animals, and hired on a couple of ranch hands to help with the increased workload. James, Sarah, and Daniel grew up healthy and happy, running wild across the ranch, learning the skills they would need to eventually take over the family business. They attended the small school in Globe when possible, though ranch life often interfered with regular attendance. Helena supplemented their education at home, teaching them to read from the Bible and the few books they owned, and instilling in them the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion that both she and Isaac held dear. One evening, when James was 10, Sarah 8, and Daniel 5, the family gathered on the porch after supper, as was their custom. The children were playing a game with sticks and stones while Helena and Isaac sat in the rocking chairs Isaac had built over the years. "You remember the day we met?" Helena asked suddenly, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Isaac smiled, reaching over to take her hand. "I remember everything about that day. I remember how frightened you looked, trying so hard to be brave. I remember burning that bill of sale and thinking it was the most important thing I had ever done." "It was the most important thing," Helena said softly. "You gave me my life back. You gave me all of this." She gestured at the ranch, at their children playing happily, at the life they had built together. "We gave each other this," Isaac corrected. "I may have burned that bill of sale, but you turned this house into a home. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to build something bigger than just a ranch. Everything good in my life started the day I met you." Helena squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick her eyes the way they always did when Isaac said things like this. Even after all these years, he could still make her heart flutter with his words. "Mama, are you crying?" Sarah asked, noticing her mother's expression. "Happy tears," Helena assured her daughter. "I am just grateful for our family." "Tell us the story again," James requested. He was at the age where he wanted to know everything about his parents' past. "Tell us how you and Papa met." Helena and Isaac exchanged glances. They had told the children a simplified version of their story before, leaving out the most painful details. But James was getting old enough to understand more of the truth. "Your mama's uncle did something very wrong," Isaac began carefully. "He tried to sell her to pay off his gambling debts. I heard about what was happening, and I knew I had to stop it. So I paid the money he was asking. But then I burned the paper that said I owned her because nobody should ever own another person. Your mama came to work on this ranch and we fell in love, got married, and here we are." "What happened to the uncle?" Sarah asked. She was always the one who wanted to know how stories ended. Helena had not thought about Raymond in years. After she married Isaac, she had severed all ties with her former life in Globe, but Sarah's question made her curious. "I do not know," she admitted. I have not seen or heard from him since the day your papa and I left Globe. I heard he left town a few months after we got married, Isaac said. Apparently, his creditors caught up with him again, and he fled to New Mexico territory. I never followed up to find out what happened after that. Honestly, I did not care as long as he stayed far away from you and never bothered us again. Good riddance, James declared with the certainty of a 10-year-old who saw the world in black and white. He was a bad man, and bad men should go away. The world is more complicated than that, son, Isaac said gently. People make bad choices, sometimes terrible choices, but we do not spend our energy hating them. We just make sure we make better choices ourselves. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Helena called the children inside to get ready for bed. There was the usual chaos of washing faces, changing into night clothes, and settling 3 energetic children down. Helena read them a story from the Bible while Isaac listened from the doorway, smiling at the sight of his family. When the children were finally asleep, Helena and Isaac retreated to their own room. It was a comfortable space now, with a proper bed frame Isaac had made, a wardrobe for their clothes, and even a small mirror on the dresser. Helena sat at the dresser, taking down her hair from the practical bun she wore during the day. Isaac came up behind her and gently took the brush from her hand, beginning to brush her long brown hair himself. It was a ritual they had developed over the years, a quiet moment of intimacy at the end of busy days. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked, watching Isaac's reflection in the mirror. "Spending that $300. It was a fortune, and you could have used it to expand the ranch earlier, buy better stock, build a nicer house." Isaac met her eyes in the mirror, his expression serious. "I have never regretted it for a single second. That $300 bought me the love of my life. It gave me you and James and Sarah and Daniel. It gave me everything that matters. I would pay it 1,000 times over if I had to." Helena turned around and pulled Isaac down for a kiss. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I will love you for the rest of my life and beyond." "And I love you," Isaac replied. "You are my whole world, Helena Quinn." They stood together in their bedroom, holding each other close, grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment. Outside, the ranch was quiet under the stars. The cattle were settled in the far pastures. The horses dozed in the barn. The chickens roosted in their coop. Everything was peaceful and right. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and challenges as they always did. There were hard years when drought threatened the cattle, and they had to watch every penny. There were good years when the rains came at the right time, and the calves were healthy, and the prices were high. There were scares when one of the children got sick or injured, and Helena and Isaac would spend sleepless nights at their bedsides, praying for recovery. Through it all, their love remained constant. Isaac never took Helena for granted, never forgot that their life together had started with an act of faith and compassion. Helena never stopped being grateful for the man who had saved her and loved her and built a life with her. When James turned 16, he began taking on more responsibility on the ranch, working alongside his father as an equal partner rather than just a helper. He was a natural cattleman with an eye for good stock and a patience with animals that reminded Helena of Isaac in his younger days. Sarah grew into a beautiful young woman with her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination. She loved the ranch but also loved books and learning. Helena and Isaac scraped together the money to send her to a finishing school in Tucson for a year, wanting to give her opportunities they had never had. She came back with refined manners and a teaching certificate, but she was still their Sarah, happiest when she was home on the ranch. Daniel, the baby of the family, turned out to be the most adventurous of the 3 children. He loved exploring the hills and mountains around the ranch, always coming home with stories of what he had seen and found. Isaac predicted he would end up as a scout or an explorer, while Helena worried he would get himself into trouble with his fearless curiosity. In 1895, when Helena was 33 and Isaac 39, they celebrated their 13th wedding anniversary. The children, now 16, 13, and 10, planned a surprise party with help from neighbors. Helena and Isaac came home from a trip to Globe to find their house decorated and filled with friends, food, and laughter. "To Mama and Papa," James said, raising a glass of cider and a toast, "for showing us what real love looks like." Helena felt tears streaming down her face as she looked around at everything they had built. Their home was full of love and life. Their children were healthy and happy. The ranch was prosperous. And beside her stood the man who had given her all of it, who had seen her worth when she was being treated as property, who had loved her faithfully for 13 years. Isaac wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "Happy anniversary, my love," he whispered in her ear. "Thank you for saying yes to me all those years ago." "Thank you for asking," Helena whispered back. "Thank you for burning that bill of sale. Thank you for giving me a life worth living." They kissed while their children groaned good-naturedly and their friends applauded. Helena felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt the first time Isaac kissed her all those years ago in the garden. Some things never changed, and her love for this man was one of them. As the party continued around them, Helena thought back to that terrified girl standing outside the saloon in Globe, certain her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the cowboy who paid the price would turn out to be the answer to prayers. She had not even known how to pray. She thought about the bill of sale burning in the dirt, its ashes ground under Isaac's boot heel. That moment had been the death of one life and the birth of another. It had been the end of her as property and the beginning of her as a free woman, a wife, a mother, a partner in building something meaningful. The years continued to pass, bringing all the joys and sorrows that life inevitably brought. There were weddings when their children grew up and found loves of their own. James married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, a practical woman who loved ranch life as much as he did. Sarah married a teacher from Globe, a quiet man who appreciated her intelligence and spirit. Daniel, true to his adventurous nature, left Arizona for a while to see the wider world, but eventually came back to settle on a piece of land Isaac deeded to him, bringing with him a bride from Colorado. There were grandchildren, 8 of them over the years, who filled the ranch with noise and laughter and kept Helena and Isaac young. They would gather for holidays and birthdays, the house bursting with family, and Helena would look around at all the faces and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. Isaac's hair turned gray at the temples, then went entirely silver. Helena found laugh lines around her eyes and mouth, marks of a life well lived. They slowed down as they aged, handing over more and more of the ranch work to James and Daniel while they focused on the garden, the chickens, and spoiling their grandchildren. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, Helena and Isaac sat together on the porch in their rocking chairs, watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. Their children and grandchildren had left after another celebration, and the house was quiet again. 30 years, Isaac said, reaching for Helena's hand. His grip was not as strong as it had once been, but it was still sure and steady. 30 years since the best day of my life. The best day was when you burned that bill of sale, Helena corrected with a smile. The wedding was the second best day. Isaac laughed, the sound warm and familiar. All right, I will grant you that, Burning that bill of sale was pretty significant. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The ranch spread out before them, more prosperous and established than Isaac had ever dreamed it could be when he bought this land all those years ago. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Helena asked. "You said I was not property, that I was not owned by anyone." "I remember," Isaac said. "You gave me more than freedom that day," Helena continued. "You gave me dignity, you gave me hope, you gave me a future. And then you gave me love, a family, and a life beyond anything I could have imagined." "We gave those things to each other," Isaac said, just as he had said many times over the years. "I was alone, Helena. I had a ranch but no real home, no family, no one to share my life with. You walked into my world and made everything better. You made everything make sense." Helena squeezed his hand, feeling the wedding ring that had never left her finger since the day he placed it there. She thought about all the moments they had shared, the good times and the hard times, the laughter and the tears, the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones. She thought about 3 children raised to adulthood, 8 grandchildren who called them grandma and grandpa, a ranch that had grown from a small, struggling operation to a successful family business. But mostly, she thought about the man sitting beside her, the cowboy who had paid the price for her freedom and then given her so much more. The man who had loved her faithfully for 30 years, who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, who had built a life with her brick by brick, day by day. "I love you, Isaac Quinn," she said softly. "I loved you when you burned that bill of sale. I loved you when you asked me to marry you. I loved you when our children were born. I loved you through every day of these 30 years, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Helena Quinn," Isaac replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Burning that bill of sale was not charity or good deed. It was the most selfish thing I ever did because I got you out of it." They laughed together, and then they sat quietly as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The night sounds of the ranch surrounded them, familiar and comforting. A cow lowed in the distance. A horse whinnied from the barn. An owl hooted from the tree line. And underneath, it all was the sound of their breathing, synchronized after so many years of sleeping side by side, of building a life together, of being 2 parts of one whole. The years after their 30th anniversary were slower and quieter. Isaac's joints ached with the onset of arthritis, and Helena found herself tiring more easily. They spent more time on the porch, watching their grandchildren play, telling stories about the old days, simply being together. James ran the ranch now, with help from Daniel and their respective families. The Quinn Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the territory, known for honest dealing and quality stock. People came from all over Arizona to buy horses and cattle from the Quinns, and the family name meant something. Isaac and Helena took pride in what their family had built, but they were proudest of the love that held it all together. Their children had learned from their example and built strong marriages of their own. Their grandchildren were being raised with the same values of hard work, honesty, and compassion that Isaac and Helena had lived by. In 1918, as the world was changing around them with the end of the Great War, Isaac fell ill with pneumonia. He fought it for 2 weeks, with Helena never leaving his side. The doctor came from Globe, but there was little he could do except make Isaac comfortable and wait. Helena sat in a chair next to their bed, holding Isaac's hand, refusing to let go even when their children begged her to rest. She was 56 years old, and she could not imagine a world without the man who had saved her and loved her for 37 years. "Helena," Isaac said weakly, his voice barely a whisper. "My beautiful Helena." "I am here," she said, leaning close. "I am right here, my love." "Best decision I ever made," Isaac murmured. "Burning that bill of sale, getting to love you, all of it." "The best decision I ever made was trusting you," Helena replied, tears streaming down her face. "You gave me everything, Isaac, everything." "Not saying goodbye," Isaac said, struggling to get the words out. "Just saying I will wait for you. However long it takes, I will be waiting." "Do not go," Helena begged, even though she knew it was futile. "Please, Isaac, do not leave me." "Love you," Isaac whispered. "Always love you." Those were his last words. Isaac Quinn died with his wife's hand in his and his family surrounding him. He was 62 years old, and he had lived a good life, a meaningful life, a life full of love. Helena felt like a piece of her soul had been ripped away. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain in her chest that made it hard to breathe. Her children tried to comfort her, but there was no comfort to be found. Isaac was gone, and the world was dimmer without him in it. They buried him on the hill overlooking the ranch, the same hill where he had proposed to Helena all those years ago. The entire community turned out for the funeral, a testament to the respect Isaac had earned over his lifetime. But Helena barely registered any of it. She stood at the grave with her children and grandchildren around her, and she felt utterly alone despite being surrounded by family. The weeks and months after Isaac's death were the hardest of Helena's life, harder even than being sold by her uncle, because at least then she had not known what she was missing. Now she knew exactly what she had lost. She had lost her partner, her best friend, her soulmate, the man who had made every day worth living. Her children worried about her. James and his wife invited her to come live with them, but Helena refused. She needed to stay in the house Isaac had built, needed to be surrounded by his presence even though he was gone. She found comfort in small things: his chair on the porch, his jacket still hanging by the door, the indentation in the mattress where he had slept beside her for so many years. Slowly, painfully, Helena found a way to keep living. She focused on her grandchildren, who needed her and loved her unconditionally. She worked in the garden, finding peace in the rhythm of planting and weeding and harvesting. She baked pies for church socials and quilted blankets for new babies, and tried to find purpose in each day. But she missed Isaac with an ache that never fully went away. She missed his voice, his laugh, his presence beside her. She missed the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. She missed growing old together, something they should have had more time to do. Helena lived for 12 more years after Isaac's death, years that were both full and empty at the same time. Full of family and activity, but empty without the man who had been at the center of her world for so long. She watched her grandchildren grow up, saw some of them marry and start families of their own. She held great-grandchildren in her arms and marveled at the legacy she and Isaac had created together. In 1930, at the age of 68, Helena's health began to fail. Her heart, the doctor said, was simply worn out. She had lived a full life, and now her body was ready to rest. Her family gathered around her in the house Isaac had built, the same house where they had raised their children and built their life together. Helena was not afraid to die. In fact, as her final days approached, she felt something like anticipation. Isaac had promised he would wait for her, and she believed him with all her heart. Soon, she would see him again. Soon, they would be together just as they had promised all those years ago. On a warm spring evening in May, with her children and grandchildren surrounding her bed, Helena Warner Quinn took her last breath. Her final words were, "I am coming, Isaac. I am coming home." They buried her next to Isaac on the hill overlooking the ranch, just as she had requested. Her headstone was placed right next to his, so close they were almost touching, just as they had been in life. The inscription read, Helena Warner Quinn, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, forever loved, never forgotten. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations of Quinns who remembered the story of Isaac and Helena, the cowboy who burned the bill of sale, and the woman he saved and loved. Their legacy was not just the prosperous ranch or the family they had built, but the example of love and courage and compassion they had lived by. In the years and decades that followed, their story became something of a legend in Globe and the surrounding areas. People would talk about Isaac Quinn, who had paid $300 for a woman's freedom and then burned the proof of ownership, not because he was forced to, but because it was the right thing to do. They would talk about Helena, who had been sold like property but had found love and built a life beyond anything she could have imagined. The bill of sale that Isaac had burned in the dirt outside the saloon in Globe existed now only in memory, but its absence had created something beautiful. It had created a marriage based on choice and love rather than ownership and obligation. It had created a family built on respect and partnership rather than domination and submission. It had created a legacy of doing the right thing even when it cost you something, of treating people with dignity even when society said they had none. And somewhere beyond the veil of this world, Isaac and Helena Quinn were together again, their love continuing beyond death, just as they had always known it would. Their story was over, but the impact of their lives continued on through their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and all the generations yet to come, who would carry forward the values and the love that had started with a cowboy, a bill of sale, and a match struck against a boot heel in the Arizona sun. The ranch still stood on that land north of Globe, Arizona, a testament to what could be built when two people loved each other truly and worked together toward a common dream. The house had been expanded and modernized over the years, but the core of it was still the structure Isaac had rebuilt with his own hands. The hill where Isaac and Helena were buried was considered sacred ground by the family, a place to go when you needed to remember what really mattered in life. And on quiet evenings when the sun set over the Pinal Mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, if you stood very still on that porch that Isaac had built, you could almost feel their presence. You could almost hear Helena's laugh and Isaac's gentle voice. You could almost see them sitting together in their rocking chairs, hands clasped, watching the day end and being grateful for another day together. Their love had started with an act of compassion and courage, had grown through years of partnership and respect, and had endured beyond death itself. It was a love story for the ages, a Wild West romance that proved that the best things in life could come from the worst circumstances, that love could conquer injustice, and that a single moment of doing the right thing could echo through generations. Isaac had burned that bill of sale forever, but what he had created in its place would last just as long. Love, family, legacy, hope. These were the things that mattered, the things that endured, the things that made a life worth living. And these were the things that Isaac and Helena Quinn had built together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, from the day he burned that paper until the day they were reunited in eternity.